Which countries should Europe be trading with? Free trade agreements create jobs and offer new markets, but is it always positive? Your questions are answered today by Jürgen Klute, a Member of Parliament here in Brussels and a member of the Economic and Monetary Committee. Hello, Mr. Klute. Here's our first question for you here on iTalk.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Laurent, je suis belge.
Hello, my name is Laurent. I'm from Belgium. My question is, you negotiate with countries like Colombia and Honduras. How do you justify these free trade agreements with countries that don't always respect human rights? Don't you think these agreements worsen the situation?
Et ne pensez-vous pas que ces accords pourraient empirer la situation?
Mr. Klute, what's the European position?
Essentially, we're not against trade, but it depends on the circumstances. This question contains an important criticism, respecting human rights. There is a human rights clause in the agreements, but the problem for me and the Parliament is how these clauses are carried out and observed. At the moment, the clauses are better and stricter, but in the past, the Commission never wanted to risk breaking trade relations.
Noch bessere, schärfere Menschenrechtsbedingungen, aber die Kommission hat nie von ihrem Recht Gebrauch gemacht in der Vergangenheit, die Handelsbeziehungen zu unterbrechen, wenn zum Beispiel...
Who's judging it? Who says this one respects human rights and that one doesn't?
That's a big question. We suggest that civil society organizations have to be involved, unions, human rights groups and so on. But ultimately they should report their findings to the Commission, and the Commission should investigate and react. But that's exactly what hasn't happened until now. The Commission for a long time had the chance to halt trade relations until certain questions were answered. For example, with Colombia. In recent years, no country in the world has seen so many trade unionists killed as in Colombia.
Okay, a second question here on iTalk.
Hello, I'm Laurent Martinez. I'm from Colombia but live in Brussels. I want to know how the free trade agreement can help me in the working world. My family lives in Colombia and I'm here. So will I have more employment opportunities? And will my family have better work prospects over there?
Mr. Klute, free trade agreements create jobs. That's an important fact to remember, isn't it? That's always a good argument for them.
It seems to be the case that jobs have been created, but the question is, who gets them? These agreements are essentially used by transnational corporate groups. That means European transnational companies get the chance to sell more products to countries with which agreements have been made.
Yes, but the people in these countries get jobs. They have access to bigger markets.
That is exactly the critical point. People in Colombia can work in these branches, they can get a job for sure. But on the other hand, it could harm local businesses. As you can see, one of these agreements is related to the trade of milk. So there is a risk that a lot of jobs in agriculture will be destroyed by these agreements. That's what concerns us.
Okay, the next question to Mr. Klute here in Brussels.
Hello, my name is Germán. I'm from Argentina, and I would like to ask you, what do you think about the nationalization of Argentinians' biggest oil company? And if you think that the EU can apply some measurements against Argentina, and if this would affect Europe in a time of crisis.
Of course, the question is about Repsol. I believe Spain owns 57%.
It's important to note that this company was originally state-owned and only privatized 10 years ago.
Nevertheless, the nationalisation was legal?
That's right. It was absolutely legal because there was a legal basis for it in Argentina to retake control of a company.
Which basis?
Well, there is a certain basis in Argentine law. As far as I know, I'm not an expert to be honest, but I've heard there is a legal basis, and the aim of it is to guarantee that the poorest have access to electricity.
Do you understand if every country does this, it'll be total chaos?
It has to be regulated, but for me the question is whether or not the private sector can ensure energy supply in the future in times of shrinking resources. Should we not find another way of democratic and social control? This is our position, and we don't think the EU should just respond with sanctions. It's a difficult situation for sure, but if we compare it to Colombia, where it's been proven that unionists have been killed, and the EU didn't respond. There was not even a reaction in the case of the coup d'etat in Honduras. So do we say in the case of Argentina that it is politically justified and understandable, and there is an immediate reaction just because EU interests could be negatively affected?
Begründbar und nachvollziehbar ist, wird sofort agiert, weil EU-Interessen negativ berührt sein sollen und sind. Aber ob das wirklich so ist, das ist eine offene Frage.
Definitely a complicated situation. Okay, one more question for Mr. Klute.
My name is Sebastian from Saragossa. I was born in Catalonia and I live in Brussels. Europe needs a lot of energy for its economy. At the same time, there's a growing need for alternative energy, the so-called clean energy, which often comes from South American agriculture. To get this energy, a lot of the natural environment has to be destroyed. My question is, what do you plan to do to protect this environment?
Another complicated question. A short answer, please.
Biofuel is another part of our trade agreements, and it is another thing we are concerned about. A short time ago, the EU published a study calling into question whether biofuels are really all that useful and if they are really carbon neutral. Regardless of that, it takes a lot of land, which could be used to produce food. Certainly action has to be taken. Biofuel is one option, but in principle, I believe, to answer the question of transport, we have to look elsewhere. I don't believe biofuel is a long-term option.
But
Mr. Klute, we're in a financial crisis. At the moment, is it possible to have scruples? That's the question.
Well, it's a question of principle. What's more important, human rights or the economy? Eventually the economy has to cut down its needs. Nevertheless, here in Europe we live in the richest regions in the world, and I believe if we use them wisely, we still have enough resources to respect human rights, even in times of crisis.
Ausreichend Ressourcen zur Verfügung, Menschenrechte respektieren zu können.
A last question here on iTalk.
My name is Carmen Garcia. I'm Latin American. My question is, if the agreement with Colombia was made to benefit the people, why is it so complicated to put it into effect?
That's true.
That is controversial. The Colombian and European economies have different interests. The unions, of course, have even more varied interests. And then there are human rights groups.
It's already taken more than 2 years, hasn't it?
Yes, of course. But it's a complicated subject. And to get all these interests under one hat is not so easy. Whether it turns out well or not, only time will tell.
Ob nun wirklich was Gutes dabei rausgekommen ist, das wird die Zukunft zeigen müssen.
I have a very personal question for you. You still work as a pastor as well as a politician. Where is it easier to do God's work?
In the
church it is easier because you only have to speak. In politics it's more important because you have to act and you have to show what is a good action and what is a good policy. How can you respect human rights?
Thank you very much, Mr. Klute. That's all for today. You can find our upcoming topics on the Euronews website. See you next time here at the European Parliament in Brussels.